Okay, we are recording. David, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Stu.
Wonderful. I really appreciate you giving up your time. I'll say this evening, but it's not this evening because you're in LA, so it's
Yeah, midday here.
midday. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, look,
All an illusion.
let's
Time
let's
is an illusion.
let's let's kick off your playlist. I'm gonna ask you to tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
Yeah, that would be Isaac Hayes covering Jimmy Webb by the time I get to Phoenix.
Tell me what it is you love about that.
I love how it's eternal, like it just goes on and on and on, and it's edging towards its real start, the start of the song, and it's sort of teasing and it implies the song. And it's this sort of slow burn, smoldering build, and it gives like it has little mini peaks, and it's all about dynamics and taking it down and down, and then a little rise and then a down again, and it's just this it's mesmerizing, I find it.
Yeah.
And first time I heard that on the radio, yeah, I was transfixed, and I thought, well, when is he going to start the song? But I don't care, it can take as long as he wants because this is great.
When it comes to you as an artist and writing, from the early days, when you started out to what you're doing now, the industry and the way that people consume their music now, through streaming services and such, has any of that ever sort of impacted in any way, shape, or form to your creative process?
But it certainly impacted in my listening process and my discovery process. And the main app that I use is YouTube Music, and I love that because I can, as it were, seed it with my a selection of one song, whatever it is, and then I just let the good robots take over the algorithms, which are not, by nature good. I think they're pretty evil, but in this context, they are good, and I'm glad they're around because it just continues playing, and I've discovered so many things, new artists, new music through that, like it's just planting this little seed, and then it's like a garden, it's like a sonic garden, and these flowers come up, and oh, I haven't seen that one before. What's that? I'll have a sniff of that, you know, and then I make a note, and then I'll go to like, and I love that little um uh where you can go to the album, go to album. And then there's a whole album of something new that I've never come across before. So in that way, it's great. It's very generative. As far as that affecting my writing process, not really. I mean, the only thing that's different is now that it's much easier to record demos because I have a phone and I have the ability to record wherever I am, even if I haven't got an instrument, and I get like an idea for a lyric or a little tune. I can record it on my
Yeah.
phone, and there it is. And it's a very good quality recording as well, that little phone. In the past, it would have to be a matter of retention, and I have to retain those ideas. And sometimes that's a good quality filter because it's like the ones that you do retain, the ideas you do retain, are like the survivors, and they're the ones that those ideas come forth. But now, I can put any old rubbish down on the phone, and then I'll get it back up, and I'll assess it, and decide whether it's worth pursuing. But it's great to have that accessibility.
See, I think there's lots of benefits about being an artist now, insofar as, if I look back to when I was doing music when I was younger, like the thought of having a music video seemed alien. And now that you can make a music video on your telephone like that, I think there's lots of
Yeah,
positives. And as you say, you can, record very easily on your telephone and on devices and such. I do think there's lots of benefits. You can market your music via all the social media platforms, but with all of them pros, do you think the recording industry is in a better position now for artists or a worse position for artists?
Mm. It's double-edged, really,
Mm,
because there is, like as you've said, it's much more, it's so much more easy to get your work out there, and it can be instant. You can come up with an idea, record it in a back room, and just send it out there within minutes. And in the past, of course, there's a whole process of the manufacturing process. Having said that, I mean, once the music's out there, it's all kind of free. So the artists are not really getting paid.
yeah,
And there's been such a complete turnabout with the industry in that back when we were putting out records, that was the main source of income, albums, CDs in particular, when that came in. And touring was just to support those sales and promotional, and we would break even if we were lucky,
mm,
on the road. But now it's the complete reverse, where the only way you can make money really is to go out and play live, and you need to have something of a marquee name to do that, and it's so competitive, and I think it's really hard for new artists to break through. Um, so it's very double-edged.
yeah. Okay. David, I'm going to ask you for your second track. I'm going to ask you to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Yeah, that was When a Man Loves a Woman by Percy Sledge when I was about, I suppose, about 11. And I had a mate down the road, Richard Miller, who turns out he was a bit of a soul boy. And he was the first kid in our street to have a record player. I had a little Dansette record player. And he had invited me down to his place, and he was really into singles. And he had a little collection of singles. He had some Stax, he had some Tamla Motown. He was really into the soul stuff, um, which he was really he exposed that music to me because I wasn't that familiar with it at that time. And I remember him putting on the Percy Sledge single, and I was just transported. And I listened to music, obviously, prior to that, and I enjoyed it, but nothing hit me on that kind of visceral, emotional level like that record did. And I just kept asking him to play it again. And it's just something, I don't know, transcendental about it.
If you had to pinpoint the emotion, what would it have been?
I didn't really understand the emotion being 11 years old.
Yeah.
It was, it was, it was sort of impassioned, it was sort of deeply impassioned.
Yeah.
And it had a kind of something. Now I can, in retrospect, look back and see it had something almost broken in its yearning, and it's very, very deeply passionate and emotional, and yeah, it just had this swell of emotion. And I think because I didn't really understand it, that was part of its power as well. I didn't really understand what was going on with that, but it affected me very in a very deep way.
I think that's the kind of how you've just described that is the kind of way that I think is the best way to answer this question, because I think I could even sort of rewrite this question, because I think it's that feeling you get when you're young, where all of a sudden a song up until then has just been music and it's just been there, and it's just the first time something sort of punches you in the face or rips your heart from your chest, and it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
what this is hitting somewhere different, and I think it's a
Yes.
beautiful
Yes.
thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Um,
Tell me, Tell me, I mean, you mentioned you had a friend up the road that had a dance set player, and you was getting exposed to the soul music and stuff like that. But paint a little picture of them formative years. Like where was it, and was home a musical environment?
It was in Northampton. It was a long street of semi-detached houses, sort of a pretty working class neighborhood. And my house, yeah, there was music there, but it was pretty limited. I mean, my parents, my dad in particular, he was into things like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, all of that. He did have one record. It's the only record that I've kept from his collection, which is the Stefan Gaffelli and Django Reinhardt's The Hot Club de France. And he used to play that all the time. And I love that record.
Yeah,
And it's very evocative of him playing that at home. He also was into things like bread. And he had bread. I remember he had bread on an 8 track that he would play in his car. Later on, we recorded a cover of their Guitar Man with Dave Navarro playing the guitar on it. I did that like 2001, I think it was.
how did that come about?
I was writing what turned out to be a bit of a concept album. And all my albums, I don't set out with an idea for a concept or a theme. It just kind of arises because what I'll write about is what's most prominent in my life. And then I make some distance and look at it objectively and I say, oh, there's a theme going on here. This one was it was very intense because it was a breakup album and it's called Estranged. And that, I don't know, that song just bubbled up, that Bread song, and it was haunting me. And I was playing it while I was writing my own songs for that record. And it kind of fit in as being, descriptive of somebody who was on the road and lonely, although, playing to a lot of people and having a certain amount of celebrity, but this this dichotomy of that kind of I would say, to a degree adoration that musicians get when they play to their fans, and then being on your own. And I really wasn't my own then because I was not living with my partner. And yeah, so it was all kind of distilled in that song. And I thought, oh, that fits in. So I had a bash at, doing the cover of it. It turned out rather well. I love what Dave brought to it. And he was identifying with it big time. And
Mm.
also there's an inference in there in the song that this is about somebody who's addicted to drugs. So, although Dave was sober when he recorded it, he was, harking back to
Yeah,
pre-troubled times. I
yeah.
also had Stephen Perkins playing drums on it, so it
Oh
was
wow.
half of Jane's Addiction. Also, uh, Mr. Kozilek from Red House Painters is singing harmony with me and also acoustic guitar.
Wow. That's
Um,
as I was driving home from from my little studio today,
yeah,
and I was literally listening to All Mixed Up, Red House Painters cover of the Cars, and it's a oh what a fucking beautiful cover that is. It's unreal.
yeah, he's really talented and a great songwriter in his own right.
Mm,
Yeah,
fantastic. David, I'm going to ask you now to tell me the name of a song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
yeah, that would be Starman by David Bowie. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a big deal. But I discovered Bowie prior to that record coming out. And how I discovered him was I heard him before I saw him, and it was on the Old Grey Whistle Test. And they used to play occasionally they would play a track and they'd have an old movie show, like, black and white, 1920s, 1930s, dancing girls, or, an old Felix the Cat cartoon, something like that. Anyway, they were showing one of these old movies, and the soundtrack really caught my attention. And it was Andy Warhol by David Bowie. And I just went out the next day to Spinner Disc Records in Abington Square and bought the album that it was from,
Yeah.
which was Hunky Dory. And I remember I went down on the bus, on the double-decker bus, and I was sit up the top. And on the way back, I was just like looking at the lyrics and having my little 14-year-old mind blown. And I couldn't wait to get back home and play this record. I actually ran from the bus stop to my house and put it on at the big gramophone, my parents' gramophone. It was like a big teak
Yeah.
furniture, And I played that record, and I talk about being transported. I was so transported, to a place that I wanted to live in. And yeah, that was it. And then soon after that, Bowie reappeared in the guise of Ziggy. So I was familiar, but I hadn't seen many images, because in those days it was so different. When you think back to it, it's so strange, like pre-internet, pre-computers and
Mm.
all that. You had no access to imagery, and that was very potent, and there was a mystique there. And I only saw, like, well, the cover of a Hunky Dory, where he looks like Greta Garbo,
Mm.
and then a photo of him on the back with long hair and wearing like Oxford bags and looking like a bit of a hippie. And then there was this transformation, and he became other in every meaning of that word. And it was on Top of the Pops. It was that famous scene that so influenced my generation, had such a galvanizing effect. Him and Mick Ronson on Top of the Pops playing Starman. And then I got that single, and I play it endlessly, and then of course Ziggy Stardust and Spiders came out the album, and again, so into that. And that was actually the first time that I learned to play some songs from a record. And it was that record, because there was a kid at school, Chris Day, who had a guitar. And he was telling me that he got the album, we were talking about the album. And he said, yeah, I've worked out some of those songs. And I didn't really understand what he meant by that. I said, what do you mean you worked them out? He said, I've worked, the chords. I said, what do you mean? He said, come around my place and I'll show you. So he showed me some basic chords to some of those tracks, and then that was sort of like magical, alchemy. Like, God, you can actually like gather in this music that's having such a profound effect on you, and kind of make a very approximate recreation of it,
Yeah.
and something of the essence of it by by making these shapes on a guitar, on a fretboard. And so that really got me into playing guitar.
Just while we're talking about those sort of formative years at school, as you sort of found your way sort of moving through school, was was it an experience that you enjoyed, and did you know what you wanted to be?
Um, Yeah. Now the thing with being into Bowie, that was a very small contingent in our school. It was
Mm.
only like me and two other kids that were into it, and we'd actually get bullied for being into Bowie. You know, Not beaten up, but certainly jostled and
Yeah.
insulted and pushed around. You know, and that made it all the more potent.
Yeah, of
Going back and
course.
listening to Bowie and cranking it up. Um, but my best friend at school, Dave Exton, who was also a Bowie nut, we later on formed a band. That was the first band, really. Well, there was a band prior to me being in a band with Dave, but it was very early days, and we formed a band, and eventually it sort of became a punk band when that all happened, because we were so into that in '76. Anyway, that's sort of rather tangential to your question. Um, mm, I didn't really, I couldn't wait to get out of school really. And I went to art school. That's where I wanted to go. And I did, I loved that. I just kept my head down really and just got through it, school.
Yeah.
But I had music to turn to as a great friend, you know. Um, and then we went to art school. We could play records in the classroom. Amazing. It was a whole different world.
Yeah. You touched on something a while back when you was talking about Hunky Dory. You said you named the record shop. You then said you sat on the bus, like, poring over the sleeve and the artwork.
Yeah,
Uh, and you run to get home to listen to it.
yeah.
And I've got many memories like that, being young and getting records and devouring them sleeves, just being able to look at them on 12-inch sleeve was beautiful things. I was that nerd that would look at every single lyric, every single production, and I wanted to know everything about it. And do you think? I know we're seeing certainly in the UK a resurgence of vinyl, but at 30 quid a record, I don't think it's ever going to be a vast thing in anywhere like it was, in our formative years. Do you think a lot of that attachment and journey and is lost in a world now where you've got everything on your telephone? I'm not, I don't want this to be, become a couple of grumpy men moaning about how it is nowadays, because I think there's lots and lots of positives with your
Yeah,
streaming services. But do you think there's an element of that journey lost now?
certainly, definitely. Yeah, yeah, has to be, has to be. Yeah, it's a shame. Uh, yeah, what can I say? I mean, I still do that. I still buy vinyl albums and I still pour over the sleeves,
Yeah.
you know. But obviously, you know, I'm an old boomer. Not, you know, there's a whole other generations that don't do that and don't have it. I don't think they have any concept of that. You know,
Yeah, true.
they just stream and it's just there, you know, in the air. And yeah, it's a very different world, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Well, look, it feels fitting now that I ask you now for your next track to tell me the first record that you remember buying from a record shop.
Yeah, that was Dave and Ansel Collins, and it was double barrel
That's
reggae
a
record.
great record.
Yeah, and funnily enough, I found out at art school when I met up with Daniel Ash that that was the first single that he ever bought.
Oh, really?
That was one thing we bonded over. Yeah, and it's like it's quite an obscure one, really,
Yeah.
relatively.
To have two people have that as their first record is
Yeah,
quite unique.
and I was banging to reggae, and it's just like the sonic excitement of those records, especially the 45s, where you get that kind of crunch to the sound. Explosive, you know, sonically explosive. And when I was this would be like 1970, so I was like 13, I would sneak into this skinhead disco, and all they played exclusively was reggae, and they played it loud and they played it in the dark, and it was amongst, you know, some pretty dangerous
Yeah.
geezers, you know, who they were amused by me and my two mates because we were dressed, you know, in the style de rigueur, you know, like stay pressed trousers, Ben Sherman shirts, Brutus shirts, the old Crombie overcoats, you know, little pork pie hats and the brogues and all that were into the fashion. So they were rather amused. These kids, I suppose, were like 18, 19, you know, and they get us to drink beer, you know, get us drunk. And it was never aggressive, actually. They like, They were amused by us and they accepted us. And but it had an edge. There was an edge to that environment that just made the music more exciting.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they also the DJs would have these records from Jamaica that you couldn't actually buy, and you could only hear them in those kind of clubs. And it was so exciting.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I want to just ask you about, you know, being privy to, being able to watch Bowie do Starman on Top of the Pops, as it was happening, that kind of invasion of reggae, and around the time of, I
Yeah.
guess it was around the time of punk, that
It
big
was pre,
invasion.
well, it was pre-punk.
Yeah, and
Just before, yeah.
yeah, and to then sort of witness punk happening, as you was putting your first bands together, did seeing all of this change make it feel that it was possible to make a job of this,
The only time that happened was when punk happened. And it
Yeah,
was when I went to see the Sex Pistols at the 100 Club. And that was it. That it made it feasible to actually do this, like, and not do anything else to play.
yeah,
Um, and by that time I'd been playing a few years, so I could play a little bit better than the bands I was seeing.
yeah, of course.
Um, Not all of them. The Clash were also on the same bill, although we didn't know them because it's one of their very earliest gigs, and they opened for the Pistols, and they were really great, and they could play. Mick Jones could really play, and we were familiar with Mick Jones just as a face, as it were, because we used to go down to London as often as we could to see bands play on the pub rock circuit prior to punk. This was like 70, 74, 75. And we'd always see this kid who was always like dressed real kind of stylish.
Mm,
And he was the face, and we were kind of in awe of him. But he looked in those days, he looked like he could have been in the Faces,
yeah,
you know, leather cut, he'd wear like
yeah,
women's leather jackets and Chelsea boots, but we clocked him, and then we see this band come on. They're so exciting, and it's like this realization. Oh, that's that kid. He's cut his hair short, and he's doing it. He's not in the audience anymore. He's on the stage.
yeah.
We could. Uh,
That's
I
important, though, isn't it? To be
love
able
that.
to look at something and just go, yeah, we can do that. And I think, punk must have done that for so many people.
Yeah. I mean, prior to that, I've been in these bands and we've been playing. Weekends, we'd go up north and play working men's clubs. That was with my brother as a drummer. But it was just like a part-time thing, and we just do covers. Then we got into Dr. Feelgood, me and my brother. And I started writing my first songs that were kind of like after Dr. Feelgood, so like R&B in the old sense. Um, and that was yeah. I would introduce these songs to the band. We're doing all these covers. How about doing this one? It's original. Um, but we didn't. It wasn't. It wasn't like a serious band. Like we could take this and actually, go out there and tour, and it was just like a weekend thing.
Mm.
But then punk happened and it changed everything.
Oh, people don't talk that often on here about that sort of pub rock scene, and being someone from Essex, we're quite proud of it because we had
I'm from Essex, as if you couldn't tell.
and
I did.
uh, and obviously,
Billericay. I
like,
saw
well,
him, I saw Ian Dury at the Hotel
yeah,
in 75,
and that's
Kilburn
the
and
thing.
High.
We had that,
What a
and we
great
had
band.
Feel Goods. We had the Hot
Yeah.
Rods, the Kurzel Flyers. They were all Essex
Yeah, yeah.
boys,
I saw all of
and
them.
and it's weird because I've only sort of discovered that more sort of retrospectively as I've got older, and and you look at like Lee Brillo and that, and he looked terrifying as a frontman. He was so good to watch. And then obviously there he is with a guitar moving about behind him. That was something spectacular to see.
Amazing stuff. Yeah. Yeah, we'll go. Oh,
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask you for your next track, please. I'm going to ask you to tell me the song that soundtrack your years going clubbing.
yeah, that's Born Slippy by Underworld. Because my clubbing time was that time, like the 90s.
Yeah.
I was never really that into going to clubs beyond that rave early formative experience of going to the Skinhead Club, when I was a nipper. Because then I was in bands and we were just going out and playing gigs. And I'd go and see bands. I'd go to gigs. I wouldn't really go to clubs. But then what happened was Love and Rockets were recording in London in '88. And we got into acid house. We'd hear this weird music on the pirate radio stations, and we were fascinated by it. These long instrumental electronic tracks, and they were coming from these uh, high-rise buildings that kids had broken into, stuck an aerial on the top, and were broadcasting. And it went on all night. And then what was also happening simultaneously was, of course, the rave culture, like the very start of it in the clubs, like Shroom and things like that. And we'd go to those clubs, like we'd knock off recording and go. And that was just like a whole other scene. With these, like, there'd just be kids in there, pretty, like, dressed all like baggy clothes, pretty, not really dressed up, but very kind of androgynous in a kind of a gray kind of way. Like
Yeah.
the boys and the girls like look the same, and they're all dancing. Sometimes they'd have like tables, have these formica table tops, and they'll be on the tables, and they'd be have a strobe, and then they'd play what we'd heard on the radio, acid house and beyond, and be these really long tracks. And then of course what factored into it was MDMA. And then we actually did a track called Bike Dance during that time. That was our exploration, our early exploration of that kind of music. We were always into electronic music, going back to like Kraftwerk and Can, things like that, Suicide. But this was exclusively electronic, and it was we loved it, and it really seeped into our own music. Um, and Underworld appeared. The first thing I heard from them was their first single, Skyscraper, I Love You. And I just adored that. And then I saw they came out they would play little clubs. I went down to see them in Brighton first time. It was a club called Zoom. It was on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Uh, so when they really blew up, of course, in England, and we'd see them whenever we could. And Born Slippy came out, and that was just so anthemic. And seeing that live, and the way they played their live gigs was great in that it was semi-improvised, and that was really interesting how it was always different, and they just sort of go with a certain amount of programming and loops and stuff, but they would improvise
Yeah.
and go out, and that was really exciting. But Born Slippy, I think, is a masterpiece.
It really is. It really is. And
To be in a big crowd, like in one of those clubs, in Brixton, somewhere like that, and all night, and that is played. It's making me shiver now.
I,
Think those
I
moments, hands in the air, like smoke
I do.
off your face on E.
I I've
It's
run
good.
a venue for the last 30 years, and we do sort of retrospective events, and we done one yesterday. And Born Slippy was the tune that made all the difference. It is the one that cuts through that intro. I mean, it's one of the greatest intros ever, and I've been lucky that I've had them on the show. They're fellow Essex boys as well. There's a lot of talent comes out of them high rises in Essex, and
Oh yes.
and Born Slippy is an absolute masterpiece. But David, I want to ask you something about, you talking about in '88 and the acid house coming through on pirate radio, the things that attracted you to it. I know that you mentioned you love a can and Kraftwerk, etc. But could you see the correlation between punk in '77, that DIY kind of, look, anyone can fucking do this, and we're gonna have a good time, and what was happening in '88 with someone buying a little sequencer or a drum machine and making acid house music and pressing it on acetates and playing it on pirate radio? And could you draw the
Definitely,
yeah
definitely correlation for sure. Yeah, big time. Yeah, and I mean a lot of the people that were in the original punk scene went into that.
mm,
It just made sense. Yeah.
yeah yeah absolutely. Well, from clubbing, I'm going to take you home, and for the next track, I'm going to ask you to tell me a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
Yeah, that's Mr. Patfish, my old mate. And RIP, yeah, it's one of my oldest and dearest friends. So when we lost Pat, that was a big sad loss. And this song, Never Give Up. I first heard it when I was producing a record in Prague, and Pat had come over and he was staying with me in this flat and just hanging out. And I was about to leave to go down to the studio, and it was my guitar. He borrowed my guitar, my nylon string Spanish guitar, and he started playing this tune, and it caught my ear on the way. I was literally like in the door jam, ready to go, and I was, and he froze me there. I was frozen, and I was pulled back in, and he started singing this song. I quietly sat down next to him, and I was in awe of what he'd just done. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, it's a new song." He said, "I don't know about it." I said, "What do you mean you don't know about it? That's one of your songs." Yeah, yeah. I said, "Can you play it again?" And I recorded it. And I pleaded with him not to abandon it because he was thinking of not pursuing it. Uh, and I just love that song. And I ended up doing a version of it, like producing a version of it, because it's on his last album,
Yeah,
and it's a beautiful version on the album. Um, I, I kind of prefer the one I did. I played bass. Actually played two bass lines on it, which he appreciated. He,
yeah,
he cottoned on to the fact that I had two bass lines going there. And yeah, it was a great songwriter and just a wonderful character. I've never met anybody like Pat, and I know I never will meet anybody like him in the future. He was a one-off, very kind of eccentric in his
yeah.
way, very English, very witty, super intelligent, and we shared a lot of music, and he had a great taste in music, and he was always picking up on things really early, and he turned me on to quite a lot of things. Happy Mondays being one of them, really early
Really?
on, when they just had a little cassette,
Mm,
you know, and we loved um, that exchange of music. That's something I really miss, like, and even now, although he's been gone a few years, I'll discover something and I'll just for a second, a split second, I'll think, oh, I've got to share this with Pat.
yeah,
And, oh no, I can't do that. And then there's this ache that comes with that. You
yeah,
can't share music. I love sharing music. That's why I love DJing.
yeah.
Just nothing like it, and just also I love turning on new young kids to new things. That's the best thing. They haven't heard
Absolutely.
something like Can, I'll play that.
Yeah,
Some 20-year-old comes. what's that? What was that thing you just played? And I'm
Yeah,
showing
wonderful. It's your last track, and I'm going to ask you now to tell the listeners of the show about a song that you think many may not know that you would like them to hear. This is your opportunity, to, as you just said, to turn someone on to something
yes,
new.
good leading, good segue.
Yeah.
This is Hanging Man by Greg Brown. And it's actually a hidden track on an album called Hymns to What Is Left. And it's a beautiful album and features Bo Ramsey on electric guitar, a wonderful player. And Greg Brown, I discovered just by chance, just had the radio on one time. It was a Prairie Home Companion. I don't know if you're familiar with that show. It's been running for years and years in America. And it's sort of like a Sunday. I don't even know if it's still on. I think it is. But it's like an old-fashioned radio show, like a variety show. And they have sort of like monologues, and they have special guests and the musical interludes and musical guests, and Greg Brown was one of the regulars. I found out later on. Anyway, I just turned the radio on and I heard this music and wonderful songs, and he played about three, and he had this Bo Ramsey playing guitar with him. So I immediately checked out Greg Brown and just started buying. I bought everything I could get my hands on, and I got like 15 of his albums now. And then this album came out. I think it was his last album. He's actually retired from music now um, because of health issues. But this song is so deep and poetic, like all of his work. And I love this song. And actually it's a favorite thing to turn friends on to, Hey, have a listen to this. And everybody I've played it to has become a convert.
Well, I'll level with you. I'd never heard of him
Yeah.
until you sent me it today, and I put that track on, and it was a wow. This is a bit special. His voice is incredible.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Very basso profondo.
yeah, and so I jumped onto Spotify to explore a little more. There is a lot to get lost in there.
Yeah. Very deep, very rich.
Yeah.
Great writer, great lyricist.
Well, we also put together a little Spotify playlist to accompany today's episode. So it makes it nice and easy for people to go and listen to the tracks that we've spoken
Brilliant.
about, and obviously we'll put your music on there as well. And David, we've been talking a lot about other people's music. I think it's about time that we spoke about yours and what you're up to. So do you want to sort of bring us up to speed with everything that's happening in your world?
Yeah, I got so much going on. I've never been so busy, actually. And I've got a lot of things in the can that are to be released. Most of them I've got deals in place. Um, I don't really want to say what they all are because for starters, it's a very long list. And also I just want to like not, jump the gate.
Sure.
But the first thing that will be coming out, it's pretty soon in May, will be a spoken word album with music called The Mother Tree. And simultaneously there will be a poetry book because it's all poems that I've written over the years. And a few of them I set to music, working with a great trio who were based here in LA that since sadly split up. They're called Rakia. And it's acoustic guitar, piano, and violin, and sometimes mandolin. And these guys, I stumbled across them. I went to see a friend, Nora Keys, play a show, a little place downtown here in LA, and she was on first, and I saw her set, which was great. And I was about to leave, and this band they were setting up, and I thought, oh, I'll just see what this lot are like, And thinking, I'm not going to stick around, but I stayed for their whole set, and I was riveted, and it was all instrumental music, and it was brilliant. And I had this idea in mind, to make this album with spoken word and music, but I didn't really know what the music was going to be. If it was just going to be me or it was going to be a band or whatever, I thought, well, these guys this could really work. And so I introduced myself and we got together in the studio very spontaneously, and we made this album in like the whole thing was done in 4 days, mixed and all, and it worked out great. And I would send them the poems, and then I wouldn't hear what they'd come up with until the day of the recording session. And then we all met up, and I'd say, "Okay, play me what you got in mind for this one. Just give me a sense of it." And I'd give them some direction if needs be. But for most of it, it was like, "No, that's it. That's the vibe." And then we would just record everybody playing and me reciting at the same time. So it's just like one take. Most of these we did one take or two takes. So that's yeah, the Mother Tree, and it's going to be on vinyl, and the book will come out, as I say, at the same time. So late May, and then I want to go out on the road with the piano player John Bernstein
Yeah,
in America, and I want to actually come to Europe. I want to come to London in June and play a few shows.
nice.
Yeah, on the back of this. So that's the first thing coming up. I've also practically finished a new solo double album. Um, and I don't know when that's going to come out, but probably next year sometime. And it's quite ambitious. Some of the tracks feature an orchestra, like 16-piece orchestra.
Wow.
Some of those string arrangements were done by one of the members of Rakia, Greg Allison, who's a brilliant arranger and actually plays everything like viola, violin, and cello. So he will be a one-man orchestra,
Yeah.
and he overdubs all of these. Although there is a track on the album that I did record in Prague. It was that time when I was there with Pat, and that's with a proper orchestra. It was actually a 23-piece orchestra.
Incredible.
It cost me a mint, I think it
Yeah,
was.
I was going to say, it couldn't have come cheap.
Yeah, I came up with this song at the time, and I had to record it, and I really heard an orchestra on it. So I had a contact for that there, and the orchestras out there are really great. They're brilliant. I mean, they're cheaper actually than in other places, but that's still expensive when you factor in so many musicians. But they're great musicians, and I felt really honored to be able to employ their services.
Yeah. Um, David, if people want to keep up to speed with release dates of what you mentioned and the other stuff that you said's in the pipeline, and find out where they can catch you live when you take that out on the road, where's the best place to follow all things you?
Yeah, well, I've got a Bandcamp. That's a good one. I've just got Instagram. I put info up there. There's a website, although that's sort of gone into the shadows a bit. Um, those are the main things. I have a Facebook, although I've been having some trouble with them of late, and I might close that all down because I'm getting a bit browned off with it.
Hmm. Well,
It's
we'll put the
interesting. Yeah, like
yeah. Well,
that's how we can make contact.
it absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we'll put the Bandcamp address in the show notes, and if it's all right with you when we release this, we'll tag you in it. So anybody that isn't following you already,
absolutely.
we'll make it nice and easy for
Yeah,
them
good.
to do so. David, thank you so much, mate. It's been lovely being able to pick your brains and talk records with you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, well, likewise. Yeah, really good. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to press stop, but don't go anywhere.
Okay.